The serene dawn mist clung to the ancient trees of Oakhaven, painting the valley in hushed silver and grey, but its fragile peace shattered with a guttural sound. It was a groan, deep and resonant, that vibrated through the very ground. Amara, the town's 40-year-old rescue elephant, swayed precariously. Her colossal form, usually a symbol of quiet strength, suddenly faltered. Her wise eyes clouded with a pain Kian, her lifelong caregiver, knew instantly was dire. He rushed, his calloused hand pressing against her immense, trembling flank. The quiet, interconnected community of Oakhaven stirred, sensing the unspoken dread that had fallen over their heart. A life-threatening infection, insidious and swift, had taken root, threatening to steal their gentle giant. Amara was more than an animal. She was the living memory of Oakhaven, a testament to resilience, a symbol of their shared humanity. Her sudden vulnerability was a wound felt by every soul who had known her quiet strength, her rumbling comfort, her enduring presence. Her very existence had defined them for decades. Suddenly, with a sound like ancient timber falling, Amara collapsed. Her vast body hit the earth with a shudder that vibrated through the very ground, a sound that echoed the collective gasp of the town, even from those still waking. Her breath, a shallow wheeze. Her eyes, half-lidded, lost their focus. Is this the end for the creature who has embodied their beginning, their hope, their very soul for 4 decades? The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with despair. But then, a single voice, Kian's, broke the spell, a raw plea against the impossible. The fate of Oakhaven's beating heart now rested on a hope as fragile as Amara's breath. Kian scrambled, his knees skidding on the damp earth as he reached her side, his breath catching in his throat. "Amara, can you hear me, girl?" His voice was hoarse, thick with a fear that tasted like ash. He pressed his ear against her chest, listening for the immense, slow thrum of her heart, finding it, but faint. He patted her immense head, his gaze searching her half-closed eyes for any flicker of recognition, any sign that the vibrant spirit he knew so well was still fighting. Raw pain twisted his weathered face, a lifetime of unwavering devotion etched into every line. He pulled out his ancient flip phone, fumbling with shaking fingers. This was worse than any past illness. This felt like the edge of an abyss. Within minutes, the first responders arrived, not official emergency services, but the early risers of Oakhaven, alerted by the tremors and the unusual silence from Amara's enclosure. Young Eli and Maya, both teenagers, 16 and 17 respectively, were first, their faces, usually bright with morning chores, now etched with disbelief and deep concern. Eli, quick thinking, was already on his phone, frantically calling the nearest large animal veterinary clinic, miles away. Maya began setting up a perimeter, instinctively knowing people would flock here. Soon, adults joined them, a quiet trickle that quickly became a steady stream. Mr. Henderson, the retired sheriff, took charge of coordinating incoming vehicles, while Mrs. Petrov, a gentle woman known for her baking, began murmuring prayers. Dr. Asha Sharma, renowned for her work with large mammals at the State Wildlife Reserve, answered the frantic call with her usual professional calm, her voice crisp and efficient. A 40-year-old elephant? What are the symptoms? But as Eli, relaying Kian's desperate description, explained the sudden collapse, the fever, the clouded eyes, her initial skepticism gave way to grave concern. "I'm on my way," she stated, the urgency in her tone cutting through the phone line. "Prepare for intensive care. This sounds severe." The first chaotic hours unfolded in a blur of motion and mounting dread. Townspeople began to gather, forming a protective circle around Amara's prone form, their presence a silent shield. Teenagers, including Maya and Eli, were directed to help prepare the area, securing temporary barriers with spare lumber from the town's hardware store, fetching buckets of water, and collecting blankets. The sheer scale of the challenge became terrifyingly clear. Amara weighed nearly 7 tons. Moving a 40-year-old unconscious elephant was not just difficult, it was impossible. She was rooted to the spot, a motionless mountain of flesh and failing life. A quiet, determined resolve settled over the community, replacing the initial panic. Whispers turned to firm statements. "We bring the hospital to Amara," someone said, a sentiment that spread through the crowd like wildfire. Whatever it takes, Mr. Henderson began organizing shifts for observation, while Mrs. Petrov led the first prayer. A collective murmur that rose from the gathering, a soft, unwavering hum of hope against the crushing weight of their fear. Kian, still kneeling beside Amara, felt the collective will of his town, a powerful current of shared purpose. He looked at Amara's still form, at the shallow rise and fall of her side, his hand never leaving her trunk. The wait for Dr. Sharma felt endless, each passing minute, a silent tick of a clock counting down against Amara's fragile life. The intravenous fluids need to be warmed before administration and will need at least 3 access points for the antibiotics. Keep the area sterile. Monitor her respiration every 10 minutes. Dr. Sharma's voice, calm but firm, gave initial instructions over the phone, her words a lifeline of professionalism in the growing twilight. As Kian sat beside Amara, stroking her trunk, his gaze fixed on her shallow breathing, the community's anxious eyes on him. The distant wail of sirens, growing steadily louder, sliced through the quiet, anxious anticipation that clung to Oakhaven's air. Headlights cut through the deepening twilight as a convoy of vehicles, marked with Wildlife Emergency Response, finally pulled into the makeshift clearing. Dr. Asha Sharma, a woman whose reputation for calm under pressure preceded her, emerged from the lead SUV, her gaze, sharp and analytical, swept across the scene, taking in the colossal, prone form of Amara, the worried faces of the townspeople, and Kian, still a statue of despair beside his elephant. She moved with purpose, her team of 2 veterinary technicians, Rajiv and Sophia, close behind, their movements efficient, their equipment cases immediately unlatched. Dr. Sharma knelt beside Amara's immense head, her hand, small and expert, pressing against the elephant's warm, dry skin. She listened with a stethoscope, felt the shallow pulse in Amara's ear, and shone a penlight into her half-lidded eyes. Kian watched her, his own breath hitched, searching her stoic features for any glimmer of reassurance. Her expression remained professionally impassive, but a subtle tremor in her jaw, a fleeting shadow in her deep-set eyes, hinted at the gravity she was assessing. "It's a systemic infection, Kian," she stated, her voice quiet but firm as she rose, addressing him and the small circle of town leaders, including Mayor Jenna Reed, who had gathered. "Likely sepsis. Her body is in full battle. The prognosis is dire. We're fighting against time and massive physiological stress." The words hung heavy, a physical weight in the air. Sepsis, dire. They understood. Yet even as the cold facts settled, a different kind of energy surged through the gathered townspeople. The news, rather than crushing them, ignited a fierce, collective resolve. Oakhaven, a community forged by shared history and mutual care, became a hive of directed action. Mayor Reed, her face grim but determined, began delegating. Adults, including carpenters and mechanics, immediately coordinated logistics, setting up a makeshift command center under the flickering halogen lights of a portable generator. Tables were brought, covered with maps of the immediate area, communication devices, and supply lists. Teenagers, like 17-year-old Liam and 16-year-old Anna, organized food and water stations for the growing number of volunteers. Ferrying hot coffee and blankets, their faces etched with a profound sense of responsibility. They prepared soft, deep bedding of straw and hay around Amara, a cushion for her colossal frame, and gently, respectfully, managed the stream of concerned visitors, explaining the need for quiet and space. The most immediate physical challenge loomed large, constructing a temporary shelter over Amara to shield her from the cooling night and any potential rain. It was a monumental task. Dozens of volunteers, many of whom had never built anything larger than a garden shed, worked tirelessly, their headlamps creating a constellation of bobbing lights. Poles were erected, ropes were strung, and vast tarpaulins, donated from the local hardware store, were carefully unfurled. The air filled with the thud of mallets, the grunt of effort, and the constant murmur of instruction. Each person, whether wrestling with a heavy tarp or simply holding a flashlight steady, understood they were building a sanctuary, a fragile dome of hope around their fallen giant. Throughout the organized chaos, Kian remained Amara's anchor. Dr. Sharma frequently turned to him, recognizing his unique knowledge. "Has she ever had an infection like this, Kian? Any previous injuries to this leg?" she'd ask, her professional queries softening as she observed his deep bond. Kian, though weary, would recount Amara's health history with an encyclopedic memory, detailing old scrapes, a childhood bout of colic, even her preferred remedies for an upset stomach. He described her behavior patterns, the subtle shifts in her moods, bridging the formidable gap between scientific expertise and intimate, decades-long understanding. Under the glowing work lights, the veterinary team began the painstaking process of establishing the first IV lines. Rajiv, with a steady hand, gently cleaned a section of Amara's colossal ear, while Sophia prepared the large-gauge catheters. Finding a viable vein on such a critically ill, massive animal was a delicate, difficult dance of touch and precision. Kian whispered encouragingly to Amara, his presence a silent comfort as the team worked. The quiet determination on the faces of the veterinary team, their brows furrowed in concentration, mirrored the steadfast resolve that now pulsed through Oakhaven. The makeshift veterinary clinic hummed with activity under the night sky, a testament to Oakhaven's fierce love. Dr. Sharma, headlamp illuminating her face, supervised the continuous IV drip, a quiet conversation with Kian underscoring the gravity of the situation. The quiet conversation between Kian and Dr. Sharma faded into the hum of medical equipment, a steady, rhythmic pulse in the makeshift clinic that had become Amara's world. The first night descended upon Oakhaven, not with the usual peaceful darkness, but with a palpable weight of anticipation and exhaustion. Shifts had been meticulously organized, each volunteer aware of their vital role in Amara's continuous vigil. From monitoring her shallow breathing to preparing the precise dosages of medication, every task was a solemn act of faith. The air, thick with the scent of antiseptics and damp earth, vibrated with a collective anxiety, each heartbeat in the tent synchronized with the precarious beat of Amara's own. Amara, a vast landscape of slumbering grey, lay vulnerable. Her immense body occasionally shuddered, a tremor that sent a ripple of fear through those watching. Her breathing remained a faint, shallow wheeze, a sound that tore at Kian's heart. The veterinary team moved with practiced efficiency, administering powerful antibiotics that coursed through the IV lines, anti-inflammatories to quell the unseen battle raging within her, and constant fluids to sustain her. Every infinitesimal change in her vitals, every subtle twitch of an ear, was noted with bated breath, a potential harbinger of hope or despair. Kian remained an unyielding anchor by her side. He never left, his calloused hand a steady presence on her flank, his voice a low, comforting murmur against her ear. He whispered stories of their shared past, gently wiped the moisture from her half-closed eyes, a silent promise of enduring love. His quiet strength was a beacon, inspiring the weary team, even as the deep lines on his face and the slump of his shoulders betrayed his own profound exhaustion. Yet he drew strength from Amara herself, from the fierce, ancient spirit that pulsed faintly beneath his palm. Dr. Sharma, a whirlwind of professional expertise and focused determination, moved between monitors and Amara's colossal form. The immense pressure of her professional duty was a tangible weight, a constant hum beneath her skin. She reviewed scans on a portable screen, her brow furrowed in concentration, the data a grim testament to the battle Amara fought. Yet, in fleeting moments, her gaze would drift to Kian, to the teenagers quietly working, to the palpable fear and hope emanating from the town. She felt the subtle, insidious pull of an emotional connection to Amara, to this extraordinary town, a feeling that wrestled with her detached scientific resolve. Outside the immediate circle of medical care, the community support continued its quiet, tireless work. Teenagers, like young Ben and Sarah, moved with a newfound maturity, bringing hot coffee and comforting meals for the core team, rotating through the long, dark hours. They understood the gravity of their roles, their youthful energy channeled into quiet service. Older residents, bundled in blankets, formed a steadfast periphery, their silent prayers and murmured words of encouragement, a constant source of strength. Their presence, a testament to Oak Haven's deep communal bonds. Then, just as the night's rhythm began to settle into a weary lull, a shrill beep from a monitor cut through the hushed tension. Amara's temperature spiked, a sudden, alarming ascent on the digital display. A ripple of fear, cold and immediate, spread through the team. Dr. Sharma's calm facade fractured for a split second, her eyes widening. "Cooling pads, now!" Her voice, usually so steady, held an edge of urgency. Intensive cooling efforts were initiated, a frantic ballet of wet blankets and ice packs, a stark and terrifying reminder of Amara's precarious state, of how close they were to losing her, even now. The hours that followed were a torturous, agonizing crawl, every minute an eternity, every slight fluctuation in her temperature, a moment of near despair. The first faint light of dawn filtered through the temporary shelter, illuminating the exhausted faces of the caregivers. Amara's breathing, though still labored, has stabilized slightly. A fragile, unspoken hope settles in the quiet space. Yet, as the eastern sky surrendered to a soft peach-hued light, painting the exhausted faces in the shelter with a fragile promise, the world beyond Oak Haven had begun to stir. A local reporter, touched by the raw, desperate unity she had witnessed, posted a raw, unedited account online, accompanying it with a photograph of Kian, his face a roadmap of worry, pressing his hand to Amara's colossal flank. The story, simple and profound, went viral. Across continents, people shared the plight of the ailing elephant and the small town that refused to let her go. Donations, initially trickling in, began to pour from every corner of the globe. Funds for specialized antibiotics, high-tech diagnostic equipment, even offers of expert veterinary consultations from far-flung wildlife sanctuaries. Kian's ancient flip phone, usually reserved for calls about feed deliveries, buzzed incessantly with messages of hope, solidarity, and awe from strangers thousands of miles away. Oak Haven itself, though already stretched thin, found new reserves of energy. The general store owner, Elara, who had known Kian since they were children, opened her inventory, refusing payment for blankets, cleaning supplies, and flashlights. The diner, run by the bustling Mrs. Petal, became a non-stop commissary, volunteers delivering hot coffee, comforting stews, and freshly baked bread to the makeshift clinic ensuring no one worked on an empty stomach. Mr. Henderson at the hardware store donated lumber, tarps, and tools, his gruff exterior softening with every passing day. And the teenagers, who had proven themselves indispensable, stepped up further. A group of them, led by a determined young woman named Lena, organized a car wash on the edge of town, its sudsy chaos a stark contrast to the quiet vigil. But every dollar earned went directly to Amara's growing medical fund. Others set up bake sales outside Mrs. Petal's diner, their sweet offerings a small act of defiance against the bitter taste of fear. Amidst this burgeoning support, Kian's own strength began to waver. Days of sleepless nights, fueled by adrenaline and sheer will, had left deep hollows under his eyes, his movements slower, his voice hoarser. Dr. Sharma, observing him carefully as she reviewed Amara's latest blood work on a portable monitor, finally intervened. "Kian," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "You need rest, even an hour. Amara needs you well." He shook his head, a stubborn set to his jaw. "I can't, not while she—" His voice trailed off, unable to voice the unspoken fear. Lena, who had just arrived with a fresh thermos of tea, saw the depth of his exhaustion. "Kian," she began softly, "can you tell me about her? Before all this, how did she come to Oakhaven?" Kian looked at the teenager, her eyes wide with a genuine, unvarnished curiosity, and a lifetime of memories flooded him. He sat heavily on a nearby stool, running a calloused hand over Amara's still flank. "She was barely more than a baby," he began, his voice raspy, a lifetime ago shimmering in his mind. "Only 6, 7 years old. Found her, or rather, she found us after terrible things. Hunters, conflict, things no creature, no child should ever see." He painted a vivid picture of a small, gaunt elephant, her spirit broken, her eyes haunted, wandering into the very forest surrounding Oakhaven 4 decades prior. She was a refugee, a survivor of unimaginable cruelty. "We didn't know what to do at first. A wild elephant here. But then you looked into her eyes, Lena, and you knew. You knew she needed us, needed a safe haven. And this town," he gestured vaguely to the bustling, makeshift clinic around them. "This town, it wrapped its arms around her. We learned to care for her, to understand her rumbles and her gentle nudges. And in doing so, she healed us too, gave us purpose, gave us something to protect, to love, unconditionally." He remembered a specific afternoon, years after her rescue, when Amara, usually reserved, had extended her trunk and gently stroked his cheek, a gesture of pure, unadulterated trust. That moment, he knew, was when their souls had truly intertwined, a chosen family forged in shared vulnerability and quiet strength. As Kian spoke, a profound weariness settled over him, but also a renewed sense of purpose. He felt a deep warmth against his hand, the familiar rough texture of Amara's skin. Then a subtle shift. Her eyelid, so heavy for so long, fluttered. Slowly, as if struggling against an immense weight, her eyes opened. They were still clouded with pain, but for a sustained, breathtaking moment, they fixed on Kian's face. A low, soft rumble, like distant thunder, vibrated from her massive chest, a sound he hadn't heard in days. It was faint, a mere whisper of her old self, but it was there. Recognition. A powerful, emotional beat reverberated through the weary team. Dr. Sharma, who had instinctively paused her work, pressed a hand to her mouth, a silent gasp of relief. Kian, tears streaming silently down his face, leans his head against Amara's, feeling the faint warmth of her breath. The rumble from her chest, a quiet symphony of life, echoes the renewed determination in the makeshift clinic. The quiet symphony of Amara's breath, the faint warmth against Kian's cheek, had brought a fragile, exhausted relief to the makeshift clinic. It was a moment of fragile triumph, a hard-won peace after days of relentless fear. But the battle was far from over. As the middle of the week approached, the subtle shifts began. Amara's condition, which had shown such hopeful, tentative improvement, began to waver. Her breaths, once settling into a more consistent rhythm, grew shallow again, then uneven. A new tension, taut and unwelcome, crept back into the air. Dr. Sharma, her brow furrowed with a renewed intensity, spent hours over her charts and readings. The slight dip in Amara's vital signs became a pronounced plummet. Her breathing grew more erratic, a ragged wheeze replacing the earlier, steadier sound. The monitors, which had offered small reassurances just hours before, now blinked a dire warning. A secondary complication. Dr. Sharma's voice, usually a steady anchor, held a tremor of urgency as she gathered her team. New tests were ordered, equipment whirred, and the hushed, frantic adjustments to medications began. It was a relapse, or perhaps a new, insidious infection taking root in Amara's weakened body, exploiting her vulnerability. The insidious antagonist returned with a vengeance. The air in the tent grew heavy, thick with the scent of antiseptics and unspoken dread. Kian watched, his heart a cold knot in his chest, as Dr. Sharma pulled him and a few key community leaders aside. Her face was grim, her words measured but stark. "We're facing a significant setback," she stated, her gaze sweeping over their tired, hopeful faces. "The infection isn't fully contained, and there's evidence of organ strain. We have two paths now, and neither is easy." She presented the stark choice: a more aggressive, risky treatment, an experimental protocol with potentially severe side effects that could save Amara, or hasten her end, or a focus on palliative care, easing her pain and making her comfortable, allowing nature to take its course. The ethical and emotional dilemma was agonizing, a brutal punch to the gut after the brief flicker of hope. Kian felt the weight of her words like a physical burden, pressing down on him, stealing the air from his lungs. His mind reeled, tumbling through decades of shared life. He remembered the frightened, skeletal young elephant brought to Oakhaven so long ago, her eyes haunted by unspeakable trauma. He remembered her small, tentative trunk reaching for his hand, the promise he'd silently made to always protect her, to never let her suffer again. A vivid flashback slammed into him. The day she arrived, a massive, broken creature, frail and afraid. The community, led by Kian, had surrounded her with kindness, slowly coaxing her back to life, to trust. Had he done enough? Was this aggressive path another chance, or a cruel prolonging of suffering? He grappled with the meaning of love and letting go, a brutal battle waged within his own weary soul. News of the setback spread through Oakhaven like a cold front. A palpable wave of fear and despair washed over the community. The teenagers, 13 plus, who had tirelessly helped for days, organizing food, cleaning, monitoring, felt the despair acutely. Raya, a quiet girl with a fierce devotion to Amara, approached Kian, her voice barely a whisper. Will she make it, Kian?" Her question, echoed in the anxious eyes of the others, was a stark reminder of the fragile hope they all clung to. Kian couldn't answer. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her fear, and walked out into the cool night. The stars were brilliant above Oakhaven, a vast, indifferent canvas against his turmoil. He looked up, seeking guidance from the ancient lights, wrestling with the impossible decision. Love, he mused, was meant to protect, to cherish. But what if protection meant surrender? What if courage meant letting go? He saw the cluster of lights from the makeshift clinic, a beacon of their collective fight, a silent testament to their unwavering devotion. The hum of the generator was a distant heartbeat in the night. Inside, Amara fought for her life, and he, Kian, was her only voice. He returned to Amara's side, his eyes filled with sorrow, but his jaw set. He looked at Dr. Sharma, a single resolute nod confirming their decision for the aggressive treatment. The silence in the tent is heavy, pregnant with the unknown. The heavy silence in the tent stretched, pregnant with the unknown, as Kian's resolute nod confirmed the agonizing decision. Dr. Sharma, her professional mask firmly in place, gave a series of rapid, precise instructions. The radical intervention began at once, a flurry of focused activity around Amara's prone form. Technicians moved with practiced urgency, their movements economical, their faces grim under the harsh, portable lights. New medications, potent and experimental, were carefully measured and introduced into Amara's IV lines. Every vital sign, every subtle shift in her shallow breathing, every tremor of her colossal frame was monitored with a heightened, almost frantic alert. The stakes were impossibly high, the air thick with the unspoken fear that this desperate gamble could be their last. A long, agonizing night descended, stretching time into an eternity. The hours crawled by, marked only by the drip of fluids, the quiet click of monitoring equipment, and the hushed voices of the veterinary team. Anxiety became a tangible presence, pressing in from the canvas walls of the makeshift clinic. Kian, a sentinel carved from worry and devotion, refused to leave Amara's side. His hand, calloused and trembling, gently rested on her immense trunk, a silent anchor in the storm. He whispered to her soft, ancient words of comfort, a litany of love and longing. Dr. Sharma, her exhaustion etched into the lines around her eyes, moved tirelessly between Amara and the banks of monitors, her focus absolute, her brow perpetually furrowed with the weight of responsibility. She felt the gaze of the community, a heavy cloak of hope and dread, pressing in from the perimeter, a silent prayer that permeated the very air. In one of the rare lulls, as a young, weary vet tech adjusted a blanket over Amara's shivering flank, Kian's voice, raspy from emotion and lack of sleep, broke the spell of silence. "She was so small then," he murmured, not to the tech, but to Amara, to the memory flickering in his own mind. Barely taller than me, though already heartbroken. He remembered the day she arrived in Oakhaven, a frightened, skeletal calf, her eyes wide with a terror he'd never seen in another animal. She'd recoiled from every touch, every sound. He'd spent weeks, months just sitting with her, singing quiet songs, offering her sweet fruits, until one day she had slowly, tentatively reached out her trunk and touched his cheek. A simple gesture, yet it had been a profound covenant, an unspoken promise of mutual salvation. "She trusted us," Kian breathed, the memory of physical ache in his chest, when she had no reason to trust anyone. "That's why we fight. That's why we always fight for her." The young tech, her eyes glistening, understood. It was a fight for more than just an elephant. It was a fight for the very soul of Oakhaven, for the enduring power of connection. Then, as the first faint light of dawn, pale grey and ethereal, began to paint the eastern sky, seeping through the gaps in the temporary shelter, a subtle but distinct change occurred. The hum of the generator, the quiet beeps of the machines, suddenly felt sharper, clearer. Amara's breathing, which had been erratic and shallow, slowly, deliberately, began to regularize, a steadier rhythm finding its way. The monitors, for the first time in hours, displayed readings that didn't scream of impending crisis. Then, her colossal eyelids, heavy with days of pain and unconsciousness, fluttered. Once, twice, they slowly, painstakingly lifted, revealing a flicker of awareness, a faint warmth in her wise, ancient gaze. Her eyes, though still clouded with weakness, met Kian's. A gasp, quiet and collective, escaped the lips of the exhausted team. Amara moved, slowly, deliberately. With immense effort, she curled the tip of her trunk. It swayed for a moment. Then, with a soft, undeniable pressure, it settled around Kian's arm. A small gesture, a profound affirmation of life, a direct, undeniable response to his unwavering presence, to their fight. A wave of silent emotional relief washed over the team, visible in the slumping of shoulders, the sudden moistness in weary eyes. Dr. Sharma, her face streaked with exhaustion and the grime of the long night, allowed herself a rare, genuine smile, a breathtaking crack in her professional armor. The impossible, for now, seemed to have been averted. Kian, tears of relief and exhaustion mingling on his face, leans against Amara, feeling the steady rhythm of her breath against his chest. The entire team shares a moment of silent, collective gratitude, watching Amara, truly seeing her, for the first time in days. The quiet relief that had settled over the makeshift clinic was a fragile thing, a thin membrane over days of terror. But with Amara's slow, steady breath, it began to thicken, to solidify into a fragile hope. The days that followed were a testament to life's stubborn will. Amara began to stir more frequently, her eyes, though still heavy-lidded, holding more light. Her appetite, a crucial indicator, returned in hesitant increments, starting with small, hand-fed portions of soft fruits and nutrient-rich mashes prepared by the town's most experienced cooks. The aggressive antibiotics had begun to win the war against the infection. The raging fever receded, and her vital signs, once so alarmingly erratic, now showed consistent, albeit slow, improvement. Her body, however, was weak, the immense ordeal having sapped her strength, leaving her a colossus of vulnerability. Life returning to such a monumental creature was not a gentle awakening. The infection might recede, but 40 years of muscle lay weakened, atrophied from days of stillness. The greatest challenge now loomed, a task that seemed almost insurmountable, getting Amara to stand. Dr. Sharma knew the risks of recumbency in elephants, pressure sores, organ damage, a general decline in muscle tone, a specialized lifting harness, painstakingly sourced from a distant wildlife sanctuary, and delivered with an urgency that highlighted the world's quiet watchfulness, became the focal point of their renewed efforts. Dozens of patient volunteers, adults and strapping teenagers like Jai, a lanky 16-year-old, and Maya, a determined 17-year-old, coordinated their strength. They learned the precise movements, the careful communication, the gentle encouragement required to assist such a colossal being. Each shift was a dance of immense power and profound tenderness, a slow, arduous process of attempting to shift her weight to remind her muscles of their purpose. Every small movement, every tremor of effort from Amara was met with hushed cheers and renewed determination. The initial crisis had passed, the desperate adrenaline faded, but Oakhaven's commitment did not waver. The daily shifts continued, a well-oiled machine of compassion. Teenagers who had once fumbled with medical supplies now moved with practiced ease. Jai, once hesitant, expertly managed the careful preparation of Amara's special meals, remembering her favorite herbs and the exact consistency she preferred. Maya meticulously groomed the elephant's wrinkled hide, checking for any signs of discomfort, her touch gentle and practiced. Their commitment remained unwavering, forged in the crucible of fear and now tempered by hard-won hope. They were no longer just volunteers. They were a new generation of Amara's keepers, their bond deepening with every passing day. Kian, though no longer frantic, became a study in quiet vigilance. He was Amara's shadow, her voice, her most gentle physical therapist. He knelt beside her, his calloused hands tracing the contours of her legs, murmuring encouragement, guiding her trunk with a familiar touch. He understood the elephant's rhythms, the subtle shifts in her temperament, the flicker in her eyes that meant she was ready for another attempt or needed a moment of rest. He knew this was a marathon, a whispered promise over every inch of slow, arduous progress. Every small step forward, every flicker of her old spirit was a victory celebrated in the quiet space between them. Dr. Sharma, seeing Kian's innate understanding and the deep well of Oakhaven's community support, integrated him fully into the long-term rehabilitation plan. Her expertise in large animal physiology, combined with his intimate, decades-long knowledge of Amara, was an unstoppable force. She devised a detailed program, emphasizing not just physical recovery, but also the importance of mental stimulation and companionship. Puzzle feeders were introduced, new scents brought from the forest floor, and the familiar voices of Oakhaven's community were encouraged to visit, their presence a balm to Amara's recovering spirit. Then, one sun-drenched afternoon, a moment of pure, unexpected joy pierced through the quiet intensity. Kian, kneeling beside Amara, offered her a large bucket of cool, fresh water. She drank deeply, a long, resonant gurgle. Then, with a sudden, mischievous flick of her trunk, she sprayed him. The water arced, catching him squarely in the face, dripping from his beard and soaking his shirt. Laughter, rare and unrestrained, erupted from the small crowd of watching volunteers. It was Amara, truly Amara, returning. A brief, joyous moment that reminded everyone of her vibrant personality and the profound success of their collective efforts. As evening falls, Kian sits beside Amara, watching her slowly, deliberately reach for a branch of leaves. The quiet crunch of her eating fills the air, a simple, profound sound of life returning, a testament to resilience. The quiet crunch of her eating filled the air, a simple, profound sound of life returning, a testament to resilience. News of Amara's recovery spread like wildfire, far beyond the secluded valley of Oakhaven. Major news channels, which had briefly covered her collapse, now returned with a different narrative, not one of despair, but of extraordinary hope and community. Journalists and documentarians descended, not seeking sensationalism, but the beating heart of a town that had refused to surrender. Oakhaven, accustomed to its quiet rhythms, handled the sudden attention with a dignified grace, allowing the cameras access, but always guiding the focus back to Amara and to the unwavering values of compassion and unity that had driven their fight. The mayor, a man named Ben, spoke simply of a promise kept, a debt of love repaid. Dr. Asha Sharma, standing beside Kian during one such interview, observed the subtle interplay between the old man and the recovering elephant. Amara, still weak but unmistakably present, occasionally nudged Kian with her trunk, a soft, searching gesture. Dr. Sharma found herself reflecting on the profound insights this unique case had offered. Her training had always emphasized a clinical scientific approach, yet here, in Oakhaven, she had witnessed a bond that transcended mere biology. It was a symbiotic relationship, a mutual salvation. Amara had needed Oakhaven for her physical healing, but Oakhaven, in turn, had needed Amara to remember its own capacity for unwavering love and collective action. "This isn't just about veterinary science," she confided to a colleague one evening, watching the last golden light of dusk fall over Amara's enclosure. "This is about what it means to heal, truly heal, in every sense of the word. It's about connection, pure and unadulterated." She saw how Kian had poured his very essence into Amara's recovery, and how the town, through its shared purpose, had healed a part of itself too. Later that week, as Amara gained strength, Kian gathered a group of Oakhaven teenagers, the very ones who had tirelessly maintained shifts, fetched supplies, and comforted during the darkest hours. Among them were Eliana, whose quiet strength belied her young age, and Matteo, whose initial awkwardness had transformed into a deep, tender connection with Amara. They sat on bales of hay near Amara's enclosure, the air still carrying the comforting scent of elephant and straw. Kian, his voice raspy, but imbued with a lifetime of stories, began to speak, not just of Amara's recent illness, but of her very beginning. He recounted her early life trauma, a harrowing tale of loss and fear in a distant land. The scars not just physical, but etched deep into her spirit. He painted a vivid picture of the frail, traumatized young elephant who had arrived in Oakhaven 4 decades ago, eyes haunted, heart broken. She didn't trust a soul, Kian murmured, his gaze distant, lost in memory. But this town just wrapped itself around her. We didn't force her to be anything but herself. We offered quiet companionship, a safe haven. He spoke of how Amara had slowly, painstakingly, learned to trust again, how her rumbling purr had replaced her frightened trumpeting, how her gentle presence had, in turn, woven itself into the very fabric of Oakhaven, giving its people a shared purpose, a quiet sense of belonging. We became her family, Kian concluded, and she, in turn, became ours. A chosen family, bound not by blood, but by a shared promise of care. Eliana, her eyes fixed on Amara, who was now slowly pacing within her rehabilitated enclosure, spoke softly. It changed everything for me, seeing how everyone came together, how every single person, no matter how small their task, made a difference. It felt like being part of something truly good. Mateo nodded, his usual shyness momentarily forgotten. I used to think community was just a word on a sign. Now I feel it every day. Amara taught me that. Others shared similar sentiments, their voices a testament to the profound impact this shared ordeal had left on them, deepening their empathy, broadening their understanding of the natural world, and solidifying their place in Oakhaven's enduring narrative. To acknowledge this journey, Oakhaven held a small, informal gathering in the town square. Not a boisterous celebration, but a quiet, reflective acknowledgement of what they had endured and achieved together. There were no speeches, only shared meals, soft music, and the comfortable murmur of conversation. People looked at each other, not just as neighbors, but as fellow travelers on an extraordinary path. Their identity as Oakhaven residents reaffirmed, strengthened by the crucible of shared concern and collective triumph. Kian stands with a group of Oakhaven teenagers, 13 plus, watching Amara, now slowly moving around her enclosure, healthy and alert. He smiles, a lifetime of love in his eyes, knowing Amara's legacy and the town's is secure in their